all right, so I'd like to call this meeting to order. We will start with accepting nominations for chairperson of the Board of Directors or School Board for 52. Are there any nominations?
Oh, I will nominate Betsy Bullard for that job.
I will second that nomination.
Okay, there's a nomination and a second. Are there any other? Okay. We have to do this by ballot.
Do we have a motion to cease?
So is there a motion to cease nominations?
I'll make the motion.
All right, look at you. First meeting, you're already on fire.
You gotta jump in.
You kind of have to.
Oh.
So there's going to be a couple ballot votes, so that's why you're getting multiple. So save them up. Did everybody get one?
Do we have a second for the motion to cease?
So a second for motion to cease, thank you.
Oh, I'll second.
Okay.
Am I allowed to?
Yes.
Okay.
You are good. So I think now we can vote.
Do we have to vote on the motions? Or do we vote on the
No.
motion to cease? No.
I don't,
Okay.
so.
But we signed that we voted, it says vote by.
Yes, you have to vote there.
Yeah,
I'm
for-
just, sorry,
for
I
the
was asking
nominee.
for my clarification.
Yep. And this is just for the nomination.
This is why it's good
Yeah.
that I'm not.
Okay, so, I'm sorry, I'm confused.
Yeah.
So, it says vote for, so is that we're voting for you?
Well, there's
For
one
whoever-
nomination.
Yeah, for
Right.
whoever the nominee.
But
is,
vote
that's
by?
me.
What does that
You,
mean?
that's you.
Your
I
name.
think you put your name.
You
Yeah.
do
It's
sign.
not a-
Not a secret
Yes.
ballot.
Oh, okay,
Right,
all right,
right.
gotcha.
Yeah, sorry.
The tension's fierce.
Do you want me to rip it off?
Yep.
Oh, my.
Because then
Hold
this
it,
is-
because there'll be other
Right,
Okay.
ballots.
don't lose the rest
I
of
will
your.
not.
Yeah,
keys
keep your
or
booklet, we're gonna have to use them again. Thank you. I don't know how this is gonna turn out.
The nail biter.
It's a nail biter. Thank you. All right.
Sometimes those are the best conversations.
I'm eavesdropping.
So 7 votes in favor of Betsy Bullard remaining or being our chair for the 2022-23 school year. Congratulations.
Thanks, folks.
Want to put those in your
Appreciate it.
scrapbook?
I may want to do
Okay,
that.
so then I would like to turn the meeting over to you, and I realized that even after we talked about doing the Pledge of Allegiance, I forgot to do that.
Yeah, so we could actually start with
Yeah.
the pledge.
Yeah,
That
that'd
would be delightful. I pledge allegiance
to
the
flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So that actually brings us to public comment. Do we have public wishing
Public
to
comment?
comment? Jimmy?
Be me, I guess.
Yep.
Where do you want me to stand?
Same rules of
Yeah.
engagement around that as far as the time limit being 3 minutes and the same expectations as far as any
Yeah.
kinds of parameters around that, which I'm sure you don't need me to go through those.
No?
We'll-
So I just want to thank you all. Hope you had a good summer. It's really short. I mean, I hope this season, the school year goes better for everybody. You know, it's nice to see faces. I enjoy doing this. I think my kids and my family is the most important thing to me in my life, and that's why I'm here. So hopefully we can get to know each other better and, you know, and figure some stuff out that needs figuring out and whatever else, and just, you know, hope you have a great year and enjoy doing this. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so since we're mostly us, and just a note on the kind of the construction of the agenda, we had some conversations with Steve about what the best way to kind of meld these two things together and accomplish everything here. We have a name tag right there. We have Cassandra's skills on getting name tags made up faster than we have ever had them before, so everybody's benefiting from that. So Steve's suggestion in melding these two things was to get that step finished up first in the agenda and then move on to the workshop part. Everybody has folders that have printed materials to go along with. I think as we get everybody here, we'll do a round of introductions again. Perhaps we'll start with Steve, and Steve's the Executive Director of the Maine School Management / Maine School Boards Association. I'm thinking I read a bio at one point, Steve, that indicated that you have something significantly north of 30 years experience in education, including time as a superintendent and time at Maine School Management, and a fabulous set of skills that bring you here this evening. So if you could
Sure.
correct what I've screwed up. And
Well, now, it's just a matter of how many decades I need to add on to your number. Yeah, Steve Bailey, Executive Director of both the Maine School Management Association as well as the Maine School Boards Association. So I do work for you and the Maine School Boards Association Board of Directors. In terms of where I've been, how I've gotten here, started out as a teacher, principal for a long time, curriculum coordinator, and then assistant superintendent. 22 of those years were in South Portland. I was superintendent of schools in AOS 93, which is in the Damascotta area, 5 K-8 elementary schools, and we tuitioned our students mostly to Lincoln Academy. In 2017, I was asked and was hired by Maine School Management to start in this position. So I've been there, starting my 6th year there. So this will be my 50th year in public education. So still very passionate about what I do, as well as all of the connections that I've made throughout my career. 48 of them have been in Maine, with 2 short years in New Hampshire back in the late 80s. But still very glad that I'm here and very happy to be doing what I'm doing and being able to have the opportunity, which is what I see, to be able to work with boards like yours. Partly in terms of training, and then also we did help partly during the search. You provided some assistance to Betsy and the board and some of the steps along the way in terms of the superintendent search. So with that, I know there'll be another part of this where I'll ask for introductions too, in terms of years of experience on the board, but I do just want to share some information that's on the left-hand side of your packets. One is just a total brochure about MSAD, which is Maine School Management Association, and the kind of services that we do provide. And Carrie saw this yesterday. She was a new superintendent's orientation that we do for new people coming into the position. And so this is one. Maine School Management does more than just come out and work with boards. We also have 5 insurance trusts, as you know. We also provide ongoing policy services. Charlotte Bates is our policy person, and Vicki Wallach is our communications director. She also will be one of the lobbyists that we have when we get to the point of advocating for legislation in the legislature. One quick point that I'd like to make is between August and September, this is a time too for school boards to be reviewing resolutions that the Maine School Boards Association will be considering at their delegate assembly. So you all should have received those, and for new people on the board, we'll make sure that we have your addresses so that we can send those to you as well. There will be a meeting in September, a regional meeting and you're in Western Maine, correct? So that's Region 6, and right now in Region 6 there are 2 directors. Natalie Andrews from MSAD 17 is one of the directors, and the second one is Greg Buccina. He's from RSU 10 out of Rumford and Buckfield. And so those 2 people serve on the Maine School Boards Association. They would be some of the folks who would be voting at the delegate assembly. We encourage you to select a delegate to attend the delegate assembly. That will be held on Saturday, October 22nd. And at that delegate assembly is where the elections are made for MSBA officers and directors, where resolutions are considered and passed or not. It takes 2/3 of the delegates present to be able to pass a resolution. And if there's any changes to constitution or bylaws, that's also where those are considered. It starts at 9:30. It will be virtually, held virtually, so people can do that from their home and not have to travel to delegate assembly. The other opportunity is coming up on, actually there are three. One is two. There's one on Wednesday, the 26th of October, and that's a board chair or aspiring chair workshop, where we're able to work with board chairs in terms of conducting meetings and different things to consider as it relates to being a board chair. The Thursday, Friday after that is the MSMA Fall Conference. And we will have a keynote speaker, and his name is David Horsiger, and he basically runs and operates the Trust Institute. And his content will be about building trust and the importance of trust, eight pillars of trust and why that's important, and especially now, within our school communities. So he'll be our keynote. We'll have 50 or more clinics, with about 15 of them or so, 15 to 18 that will be legal clinics where you can you kind of pick and choose which ones you want to go to. But it's a very good day and a half, a little more than a day and a half of professional development for board members to be able to both be with one another as well as to gain content that you might find helpful to come back to your board. So those are a couple of things I just like to promote at this point in time. The smaller brochure that you have basically does speak about the Maine School Boards Association. It also identifies the 9 regions of the school board associations, which are consistent with the 9 regions for the Superintendent's Association. So you're listed here within Region 6, Western Maine. And as you can see, Region 1 through 9, as well as the officers, are listed in the blue box up in the upper right-hand corner. So that's, again, just information for you. So thanks for the opportunity to share. In terms of tonight, we've had introductions a little bit in terms of early, but I think if you could just, again, restate your name. I know the town you're elected from because I know that, except for the gentleman who came in a little bit after the others, and as well as a number of years on the board. That would be helpful in terms of just knowing the levels of experience of who we've got around the table. So that would be great. So we'll start with you.
I'm Crystal, and I'm going into my 3rd year.
3rd year, not
Yes.
3rd term, but 3rd year.
3rd year.
Okay.
First term.
Yep. Okay. Tammy.
Yes, I'm newly appointed. I'm a rookie.
Okay.
Anthony Shostak, first year.
Okay.
There's a run of rookies right here. so-
Okay.
Yeah, that was, I just realized that, I was like, that was not on purpose.
Okay, and you're Joe, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then Betsy and Carrie and Teresa.
Didn't ask that one.
I know.
I'm Jamie, and I think I'm like 5 months in, maybe,
So were you appointed or elected?
elected.
Elected. Okay. And let me just ask here, are your votes by town, and so they're at different times of the year?
Yes.
Yes. There was more consistency this year, I think, as far as seating. Leeds waited to seat until July, so Green and Leeds ended up seating at the same time,
Gotcha.
despite the fact that their elections are at slightly different times.
Okay, and they
Turner-
determined that it would be
Turner
a
didn't
July
wait at all.
1st time they would be seated.
And Turner
And
just,
yours was right after the
Yeah.
election,
Mhm.
town meeting in March,
April.
April. Okay. Miss Jamie. And Brooke.
I am almost through my first year, so not totally new, but
Okay. So finishing up your first year. Good, all right, thanks. Well, tonight in terms of information, and it will approximately be about 75 minutes it will take in terms of sharing information. I hope it'll be conversational, but I do have a lot of information to present. So we can talk about how you'd like to have that presented. On the left-hand side of your packet, behind those 2 brochures, you do have a series of slides. And while we won't go through all the slides that are in that packet, it is a good place for me at least to organize our work, and then also to give you a chance, if you want, to take notes or to be able to ask questions and that type of thing along the way. So that's for your use, our use, in terms of just organizing the material. On the right-hand side, We've organized a number of handouts. Some of them are policies from your policy manual, and we'll use those to be able to help ground ourselves in some of the important conversations we'll have. There are some others, suggested readings that we provided for you, as well as we may have some sample policies from MSMA if we didn't find one that we typically would put in as it relates to a particular topic. So these are things that we do typically do during a board training, board workshop as it relates to boardsmanship. So very glad to have you here tonight, and we'll just kind of get moving. So in terms of purpose, as we think about why we're here, really want to take a look at reviewing the main statutes. Because statutes are important for a couple reasons, and we'll talk about them as we get into the first few slides. The other piece, essentially, you've got, as I heard the time of service that you've had, you've really got about 5 new players on the board, within the last year. And so you end up with the possibility of finding new ways to work together. You've got a new superintendent, and so in terms of how do you develop yourself, as a team as you come forward in terms of moving yourself forward in terms of this new school year and the new governance team that you've been able to put together. And with that, Kyle will just introduce myself to you. I'm Steve Bailey, Executive Director of the Maine School Management Association, as well as the Maine School Boards Association. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Okay. And in terms of years of service, Kyle, how long have you been on the board?
Probably the same as me, right? 5 months?
Yeah, 7, maybe 6.
Got a bunch of freshmen.
Yeah, a lot of kids.
Okay, so that emphasizes my point even more, I think, in terms of, why it's a good thing to be here. So I would say, okay, Betsy and Crystal, you're the veterans, huh?
Yeah.
It's just so sad.
And Jess.
And Jess is not here.
Jess, that's right, okay, didn't know that. Okay, all right, well, good. So in terms of talking about developing yourself as a team, I mean, that'll be one of our major goals, for yourself as you think about your work throughout the school year. This is an opportunity for board learning. It shouldn't be the only time. Matter of fact, as I think about service on a school board, I often say that it takes at least a year to be able to know the cycle of what it is that needs to happen when throughout the course of the school year. And there are certain things that just naturally do that. And if you don't have one, I would encourage you developing a school calendar for the board, that would help identify, okay, what are the typical things that happen, over the course of the year. And I do have a couple of samples if you'd like some that you can just take a look at. And sometimes those happen by months, sometimes they happen by function in terms of, what specific areas of the school district that you want to be focused on. Is curriculum? Is it finance? Is it facilities? Is it transportation? Is it food service? Those kinds of things, and when and how those things should be paid attention to. So a planning calendar, a governance calendar for you as a board, would be a helpful tool in that particular way. So the other piece that I would say is this is a workshop within a regular meeting. You can do this really any time within your agendas in terms of if you have a topic that you would want to speak about. Your workshops are still held within the public. They're not executive sessions. So you could do it before the meeting. You could do it after a meeting. You could do it within the meeting. You could do it even as a separate special meeting. But taking some time to review, let's say, a chapter. I provided Betsy with a book, How to Become a Better Board Member. There are chapters or parts of chapters or even paragraphs in there that sometimes you could just read and then say, how does this apply to us, and how could this impact our work together as a team? So those would be some learning times that I would encourage. It's awful easy in terms of the course of the year where you've got so many things and tasks to pay attention to not provide yourself that time to help yourself learn and take a breath to be able to say, what is it that we need to do to make sure that we're helping ourselves grow? And that's one of the things I really would encourage yourselves to be thinking about, as you begin the school year. And I'm glad you're taking this time, before you're actually into the school year with teachers and students here. So you've got a little bit more time to breathe. Not much, but you get a little bit more time to breathe before you actually are into the midst of everything. And I would agree with the gentleman that, and I had a call today from a reporter, that it's nice to be thinking that we're going to be back in school, be able to see everyone. That, the intent is, 5 days a week back in school, everybody. And that's just kind of an exciting thought, again. So that's real hopeful. So the other part in terms of tonight really is to think about how we create a strong collective understanding of roles and responsibilities. And I will tell you that being a school board member is different than any other board you've been on in the state, unless you've been on another school board, because your responsibilities are governed by state statute and not by the town that you were elected from, not by anybody else or any other group of constituents. Your responsibilities are guided by state statute. And so we'll talk about how that plays itself out in terms of your roles. So, given that level of kind of introduction, are there things that, coming today and knowing that some of you are very new and you just kind of say, okay, what have I got myself into? Are there things that you would like to learn about or that you had questions about? You want to make sure that they're discussed before we leave tonight. And for veteran board members who are here, are there questions that you have that you think that others, if they were asked, would benefit other people hearing about them?
To me, anyway, Steve, I think that big component of what does statutes say that both our responsibilities are, and what kind of guardrails does statute provide as far as how we operate. I think that's important because it's not necessarily intuitive. It's not, as you said, it doesn't have so much similarity to other boards, either elected or appointed, as one might assume, without really looking at statute. So I think that's a big thing, and I think it would be very helpful. You touched on it a bit here in the beginning. Suggestions as we figure out how to work together, and as we figure out how to provide the right kind of guidance, and whether we call it onboarding or whatever we want to call it, the right sort of relationship to make sure that our work with the superintendent is productive, and that we have the kind of communication that ensures that she knows what the board is expecting of her, and that we're clear on what everybody's expectations are, and that it's, we at least try to avoid some pitfalls that you may or may not have seen in other places. I just as soon learn from somebody else's experience.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, then what I would ask then is, as things come up, as I start talking or as other people ask questions, don't hesitate to ask a question, in the middle of, as we get going, okay? Because it's best if something comes up in your head, to deal with it right then, and either to know when it's going to come up in the presentation, or we can deal with it right then. So please don't hesitate to bring that up. And so the very first thing I want, you wouldn't be sitting at the table unless you'd taken your oath. Is that correct? So you did that at the town office, or do you do it here as part of the MSAD? Town office. I was at a meeting 2 nights ago where they do it as part of the RSU, so they were there, they had done it that way. Most people do it in the town. And the oath that you took, it should be very similar to what you see here. Swearing you'll faithfully discharge to the best of your abilities the duties incumbent on me as a school director of MSAD 52 according to the Constitution and laws of the state. So that's where your oath comes from. And that's where it actually provides for you to then pay attention to the Constitution as well as the laws of the state. The legislature is the place where school boards, school committees gets your authority and your responsibilities. As I said before, it doesn't come from the town, it doesn't come from any one of your towns. It comes from the state. And that's what guides you in terms of and I'm going to go to the next slide. As the governing body for your school administrative unit, your statutory powers come from Title 20A, and while there is a statute book that comes out and is printed every year with the updates that are provided from the legislature, I found that I use the online version. I go to maine.gov, I go to legislature, I go to statutes, and then I find the Title 20A and I go down to it, and then that's where I use the best source of information for me in terms of what's the most recent adaptation that's been made to the law. And that particular place is where you find out, what your responsibilities are. All laws for school boards are in section 1001 of that Title 20A. And within that title, it starts right up at the top, that it talks about school boards shall, or school boards have the authority to. And I want to make the distinction here because the responsibility is given to the board. The responsibility is not given to the individual board member. You only have authority to act when you're together as a board, meeting in an officially called meeting like you are tonight. Now that can be a special board meeting, that can be an emergency meeting, that can be a regular meeting. They all have to be given notice, they all have to be posted, they have to post the location, the time, and what's going to be on the agenda in terms of what's going to be covered at those meetings. And then you come together and you meet, and that's when you have authority, when you talk about things and you take action as a board. But I just want to make that distinction that as individual members, you don't have any authority. So that piece is emphasized in your handouts. Numbers 1 and 2 on the right-hand side of those handouts. 1 is kind of a summary of what's in the law book in terms of those seven different areas, being legislative, policymaking, educational program, personnel and employment. You have a quasi-judicial role. We'll talk about that as we go through. Budget and finance, school facilities, as well as communicating with the public. So those are basically from the statutes. And then you go to your policy, BBA, school board powers and responsibilities. And these are taken from the law as well. And if you could take a look at the very, very top, you talk about the MSAD 52 Board of Directors shall have a general charge of all public schools and shall exercise other responsibilities as specifically provided by laws and regulations. The board shall concern itself primarily with broad questions of policy rather than with administrative details. The implementation of policies is an administrative act to be performed by the superintendent and his or her staff. So right away you end up with, okay, the board's over here doing this, the superintendent is doing this as it relates to the administrative detail of things. You're at a policy level, you're at what we would call the 20, 30,000 foot level in terms of making sure that the school is well operated, the school unit is well operated. Not operating the schools, because that's the role of the superintendent and her staff, but making sure that the schools are well operated. So we'll talk about how accountability happens with that a little bit later, but this sets the stage for, okay, what's your responsibility, what's the superintendent's responsibility? So letter B on that is selects, employs, and evaluates the superintendent. So the superintendent is your one employee. You hire, you're responsible for hiring the superintendent. And after that has happened, the superintendent has a responsibility for making sure that the district is well staffed. Now, by law, she has to bring to you principals and teachers. Those are two positions that by statute have to be brought before you for your approval before she can offer a contract to those. Other positions don't have to be, but in some cases, boards do ask that those positions also come to them for approval. And I think from what you said yesterday that that's been the case here. So in that particular way, the superintendent brings to you a recommendation or nomination. You have the chance to discuss it and you can vote on it. You can approve it, you can not approve it, but if you approve it, then she's given the opportunity to provide a contract for someone that she wants to, as a nomination to you, she wants to hire. If she finds out, and there have been cases where we've seen this, if there's something she finds out between the time you've approved a nomination And when she would go to offer the position to a person, if she finds out that's not going to be in the best interest of the district, she can decide not to offer that contract. She doesn't need to go back to you to say, I found out something that I would rather not, can you reconsider this? That doesn't have to happen. She would just bring before you another nomination for the position of somebody else. And more than likely in executive session indicate, you know, the reasons that she could share with you to be able to indicate the actions that were taken. But that's the process, and that's your role, that's her role as it relates to this particular policy. Meaning that, again, that she's your one employee. Other things that you're responsible for are included here, and they're pretty typical in terms of what you might expect a school board to be doing. And this is a policy that you should know. I would say that all of your policies, you know, should be ones that you are aware of, that you study. They're online, which means you have access to them. Policies are the foundation for how the school district operates. If you end up without a policy, typically there's a policy that indicates in the absence of policy, the superintendent will make the decision on those particular issues if that comes up. But your policies, we consider them your foundation. We consider them your owner's manual in terms of how the district is happening. And you've had boards before you that have come forward on recommendations from a policy committee to be able to say, this is what we think should be happening as it relates to different aspects of policy, you know, for the district. So there are multiple sections within your policy manual. You know, as part of your initial homework for new board members, I would ask that you become familiar with them, especially starting with section B, actually I would say A and B. Section B being the section that has to do with board responsibilities. So that would be a thing that I would mention. So, as board members, you either were appointed or you were elected as individuals. However, as soon as you were sworn in and now you're at a board meeting, you only have authority when you're together as a board, so no authority as individuals. So that, for me, says you shouldn't be making promises to people outside the board meeting in terms of, number one, how you're going to vote, or number two, that you're going to take care of something and you're going to take it to the board and they're going to do such and such. You don't have that authority to make those kinds of promises. So when you do come together, that's the time when topics and items on the agenda are discussed and talked about. And then a decision is made, you know, by the board as to which way you're going to go on a particular item. And we'll talk a little bit about that in terms of voting and that type of thing. But let me ask a quick question. Do you weight votes here, or is it one person, one vote? Weighted votes? So that's based on population? Yeah. So that plays into your votes in terms of how decisions are made, and it also plays into the importance of people being at meetings, because if you're absent from a meeting, then it also means that the weight of your vote is absent at the meeting. So that's important to just recognize in terms of as you go through how things play out, you know, for your meetings. So just as a reminder, this other slide, no authority except when acting as part of the majority of the board. So by weighted vote, the majority of the board is determined by that weighted vote, and the majority of the board is the determining factor as to which way your vote goes on a particular item. So when you're part of that majority, you are exerting your authority to be able to say, yes, we want this action to happen and we want it to go in this direction. So any questions on any of that so far?
Is it out of line to ask how the votes are weighted right now?
Not at all.
We actually updated the names. I think it's in the bag over there, so I can tell you the points.
Yeah.
But we
There's
went and
those are
updated the
printed,
names.
so-
It's in the founding document of the SAD, because I actually didn't know. I had the old form.
Sure.
So if you want to keep going
Give us
when I
something
have
time,
it.
that's fine. I can
Yeah,
write
no,
it
I'll
down.
get it. No, I'll get it, because we did update it, make sure we had it accurate.
So related to this conversation and what we've talked about, this to me is an important slide, and it's important as it goes to your handout number 3, which is a letter from the Assistant Attorney General to the Maine Department of Education. She was asked to prepare this because in the legislature that year, there was a law that was proposed that school board members should be responsible to their citizens, or to their residents. And right now, that's not the way it is. Right now, school boards are responsible, and your constituents are your students. So the question was, okay, well, who should they be responsible to? And the bill, was trying to get the emphasis to be on responsible to the citizens. So if you can think for a minute in terms of if that were the case, what could be a primary concern of citizens as they thought about schools and your school unit?
Taxes?
Budget, taxes? Yeah. And if that was the primary determining factor, and you were responsible to them in that particular way, how could you, rightfully so in my mind, advocate for kids? So with students as your constituents, that's really one of the major areas of focus in terms of focusing on what are the needs of the students. That's not to say that you don't have a balance there in terms of what the needs of your communities are. Because in this particular slide, as it speaks about that, you're going to view your role as ensuring the views, beliefs, values, and self-interest of the constituencies they know best are on the table as part of the conversation. That means you're hearing people, you're listening to people, you're talking to people, they're talking to you. And you've got that in the back of your head in terms of bringing that information to the table when you have a conversation. Together, though, you have information in terms of your own beliefs as well as what you know is happening within the school district. And your students need to be your primary concern. So what's in the best interest of the students? And then you've got this other information that's here. So as you're even developing a budget, you're thinking, okay, well, what's in the best interest of students, but what can the communities sustain? What seems reasonable in terms of where we know we want to be going and where we know we need to be going, but what's possible, within the money that we get from the state as well as, what the communities have as reasonable resources to be able to spend. So that's, some of the battles that you have in your head as well as at the table, with regard to those conversations. That last sentence, though, really reads, I need to change a word here, you voice interests and opinions of those you know best at the table during discussions. And I'd say, but vote on behalf of the best overall interests of the organization. And the organization is the school unit, it's the students, as you consider that. So as that relates to handout number 3, I just want to read what this is a case law that was highlighted by the Assistant Attorney General. It was something that was determined back in 1924. And so it's a while ago, but it's still law that makes a difference and was very, very important in the decision that the Assistant Attorney General wrote back to the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee as well as the Department of Ed. The case was the issue of a right of an orphan to attend school in the town where his guardian resided. The school committee denied him access to the school because, among other things, they felt that too many wards of the state were being placed in their town, which was an unequal burden that the town should not be obligated to bear. The law court, in ordering the student be admitted to school, held that the school committee was obligated to follow the law with respect to residency, not their views about the fairness of the law to their town, which really identifies, students that come and reside within your towns, you have the responsibility to educate, regardless of their special education needs or other needs that they might have, to be able to educate them. And as disheartening as that might be, for some residents in terms of what the impact on taxes, might bring, it is a responsibility of your communities to be able to do that. So that relates to the middle 2 paragraphs on the front of this document. I just want to share that a little bit too. The Maine Constitution affords control over education to the Maine legislature. School boards are creatures of statute with their duties and responsibilities described therein. The nexus of the concern about school boards' responsibilities for and responsiveness to their respective communities appears to be the statement contained in a decision of the Maine's law court that the school committee acts as a public board. It in no sense represents the town. Its members are chosen by the voters of the town, but after election, they are public officers deriving their authority from the law and responsible to the state for the good faith and rectitude of their acts. So education was a result of the Constitution of Maine saying that towns will provide for education to their children that live within their towns. And then the legislature has identified other aspects of the law that speak to how school districts, are supposed to be carrying out that education within the school unit that you have. So, Betsy, I think that goes, both of these areas that we've talked about in the last few minutes, I think goes to the statutes as well as the law in terms of, how a school unit, how a school board gets authority, as well as the direction that it needs to take with regard to playing out the responsibility to its students, within a district. So, good time for questions if you have them. Comments?
I'd like to hear the votes when there's weighted votes.
Yes, please do
What
that.
the map looks like. So, it's by town and I assume, relative to population. So Joe and Crystal, you each have 94 points when the vote is taken. Jessica, Jamie, Betsy, and Tammy each have 115 votes, or points. And there's 4 of them. And then the 3 who are from Green each have, so Brooke, Kyle, and Anthony each have 117 points. So there's 3 versus 4, and a couple points difference. So most votes that I've ever seen, the board I came from had weighted votes. Most of the time, it's pretty obvious you don't need to do it. But when it looks like it's close, then you go to this. Is what my experience is. I assume that's what you guys have done too.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. If it's a clear majority, it's a clear majority. There's no reason to exercise anybody's particular math skills when there are, and Steve touched on an important point too, when we have challenges with folks attending meetings. I mean, life happens, obviously, but when there isn't the full board of 9 seated, then that weighting can play a bigger role if there's whatever combination of people, and we do need to be more cognizant of keeping track of
And
those.
if we're missing somebody, I feel like this came up once, we were missing somebody, so we had 8 members, and it was 4 and 4, and that was when weighted really came
Right.
into
Absolutely.
one side versus the other.
And of your 9 members, is it 5 that have to be present for a quorum?
Yes.
So you can conduct business if you only have 5 members?
Yes.
That was a statement and a question.
But you considered a board with 3 though, right?
5.
It's always 5?
And we've talked about that a little bit as it pertains to subcommittees, and I'm hoping that Steve will share some of his thoughts around that, because the way our policy reads, the chair is
Ex
a
officio,
member,
yeah.
right, exactly, of any of the committees, so the chair could participate in those subcommittee and proceedings. All those agendas are posted, so they're communicated. It's not like any subcommittees are meeting in a not public manner, and we tend to do our subcommittee work in a not terribly formal manner, in that subcommittees typically don't come back with this was the vote of the subcommittee recommending X, Y, or Z. So, but if there were, at one point we had 4, I think, on a subcommittee, so we did kind of debate back and forth, is that a wise route to go? Because it's like magic, if we have 5 people, all of a sudden it's an official meeting of the board where actions at that point, my understanding
Actually,
can
it
be.
doesn't have to, and I'll talk about that right now. Because actually, there's another board that has a policy that says, obviously they have those standing committees, and their other board members are encouraged to attend the meeting.
Right.
If your meetings are publicized, and you have certain members who are on the committee, and so those committee members would be the folks who would be recommending any action from the subcommittee, to the full board. So if you have 4 and you had the board chair or another board member be present, you would be like another member of the public who would be eligible to come to the meeting, but not necessarily, I would say, not necessarily participate in the meeting unless you were asked a question or asked for information to participate, to contribute, to the meeting. So,
That makes sense.
so you'd have the four sitting members of the committee and other people who would be there to either listen or if you had information to be of value to the committee, they would ask for it, as part of that. But if there were a vote, or if there was even a consensus, okay, are we ready to take this, to the full board? It would be the subcommittee members who would be determining that to be able to go forward to the board. The other part of that is, and I'll just touch on this at the same time, I know we've got public participation that we were going to talk about as well, but in subcommittees, public can be there, but they don't have a right through the law to participate within the subcommittee meeting. They can be asked, if they have questions, or, if you want them to participate. And matter of fact, you may be asking other people, be it the transportation supervisor or somebody else like that, who might have information of value to be able to contribute to the meeting. But members of the public can come, they can attend. There's no public comment period in subcommittees, as there is in meetings of the full board.
There's no one mandated, there could be.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, there could be. Matter of fact, they could ask for information from the people attending, but there's no right of participation by the people who are sitting in the audience, kind of listening to the subcommittee work. Yeah. But as Anthony said, it could be included or it could be asked for. Matter of fact, you may structure some specific meetings where you might seek information from the public.
As a matter of practice.
Yes.
That's definitely,
Yeah.
Teresa can speak to the curriculum and policy piece, and I know the plant transportation, definitely, if there's something that's going to be discussed, I think our directors are pretty diligent in trying to make sure that we have, if there's a person or a group or
Right.
something that's gonna be impacted by either a policy change or a physical location or something like that, we do try to get that involvement as soon in the process.
Can I ask about presentation? So
Sure.
at the Curriculum Policy Committee, we've had groups come in to present about the gifted and talented programming or other things that are happening in the district. That is still allowable because it's an agenda item that is posted.
Right.
Okay.
So those would be some of those special people you would be asking to come in to provide information to the subcommittee so you can be informed as well as to make future decisions.
Right, and I know one time we had some food service policy changes and the director actually came.
Right.
Because there was a lot of questioning around
Yeah.
that. And he participated in the meeting because he was the one that held that knowledge. But when the vote was taken, he didn't vote. He
Right.
just, okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank
And
you.
Betsy, I see a hand. I don't know how you want to deal with members of the public in terms of tonight, but I do see a hand behind you, so.
Yeah, I think we had intended this to be relatively informal and a great way to surface some questions, and
Okay.
my seeing in the back of my head is
Okay.
not so good, so I'm gonna let you field that since
Okay.
I can.
You touched on a little earlier the representative role of the board members, that they represent the school unit, and not necessarily those that elect them. My question would be to you, if the school board or a particular school board member is not following policy or law, to whom are they accountable?
They're accountable to themselves, the board. And so, if that were the case, then the issue would be raised to the board chair, or the board chair may even identify that that's the case. And in terms of the ways that I have seen most effectively deal with this, if that's occurring, then it's important for the board chair to have a conversation with the individual that may be not following or a particular policy. And then if that doesn't work, then there's also a possibility there can be executive session where the board can go into executive session for the purposes of talking about duties of elected officials. And within that construct of an executive session, it can be a reminder to the person as well as a conversation about things that were not happening correctly and how they need to be happening. In Maine, unless there's a charter provision within a community that allows for recall of elected officials, then that's not an option within an MSAD board. But that has taken, it's not a pleasant process, but if something were to occur and it would reoccur, then it's possible if that was a provision within the charter where that could occur. There's no MSMA, MSBA, we're not a watchdog group, nor do actions of board get reported to us where we have any sanction over boards. There's no other state authority that sanctions boards. Board members, it can be possible that if something is so severe that the board considers the need for a letter of censure or a vote of censure, school boards can censure individuals if they are so totally out of line that their views, their actions, their comments don't represent the actions and views of the board. And in that particular way, the board can separate themselves from the actions or comments of a particular board member. Again, that hopefully never would have to happen, but that is one of the ways that could be dealt with. Yes?
With respect, sir, if it would so happen that perhaps, let's just entertain the idea that it would be a majority of the board, let's say, voting for something that would be in some way against the law, then you would not have the support of the majority of the board to censure the board itself. So in other words, it's the fox watching themselves. They're not going to censure themselves. So there is no way other than recall to...
Either recall or vote at the next election.
So no bonds, no... Thank you.
Yes?
I just want to know, what's the, I know that in the policy it kind of says it, but what's the best way, or is there like magic words that, like, if I wanted to get a policy on the agenda so it was looked at and discussed and taken further, like, what do I get up and, like, what do I do to get that so it takes place? You know what I mean?
Well, you could make a recommendation, or you could make a request, and that could be to the board chair, it could be to the policy chair. However, they're making the decisions as to whether or not what policies need to be reviewed, what policies are important for the school unit to be considered and to be able to be included as part of that conversation and discussion. So even as it relates to the board agenda, it's the board chair and the superintendent that prepare the agenda in terms of the planning for your meetings. There may be a way for individual board members to request that certain items get placed on the agenda, but and I didn't look at your policy as it relates to agenda formation, but typically it's the superintendent and board chair that determine what's going to be considered for business or for action on the agenda.
Would they, like, if I asked for something like that, would the normal procedure would be to be like, no, Jimmy, we're not gonna do that, or do they just,
It might not be an automatic no, it might be, we'll think about it, or we'll bring it up at the committee level and then have a conversation about it, but it does not.
At least the dialogue.
Potentially, yeah. And to go back to your question and comment before, it's the expectation that school boards would abide by the law. It's the understanding and the expectation that the board would follow your policies. As I said before, that the policies are your foundation for operating. And in terms of the policies that you have, if you find there are policies that need to be reviewed, then they get kicked back to the policy committee for a review and in conversation and consideration. And if a change is determined necessary, then they would come forward from the policy committee to the full board. It's only the full board who can take action on revising or changing a policy, but that would have to happen. Yes,
Can I ask I don't know if it's an ask, but you mentioned Charlotte Bates earlier. There are a list of policies, and I know they're in those books, that are required.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes districts can adopt policies beyond that.
Right.
But they don't make up their policies. They get samples. Are you familiar with school boards that make up policies, and how does that work? Because all of this is based in law. So I'm just,
Most of them are, and all the required policies would be based in law, and then we have another series of recommended policies. Now, one that you probably would look to another district if you didn't have one, I'm just thinking about building use facilities policy. That's not one that's required, it may be recommended, but I doubt it's even on the recommended list, but I mean, you wouldn't necessarily start from scratch on that. You'd seek other school districts and find out what do they have and what makes sense for you. So that would be an example of, where the policy committee might, just be able to be creative in terms of what makes sense for MSAD 52.
Okay.
Tammy?
Okay, so, we got this little book
Yes.
here, and, in the back, it has the Maine Constitution, so it's like really, to me, quite an honor to be sworn in to follow the Constitution of the United States and the state of Maine. So if I'm to do this job correctly, how well do I need to know policy and statutes? And, I mean, we have our policy handbook here, and then we have the selected Maine statutes here to be familiar with, and then I'm not sure what you were really, referring to as far as policies from.
if you look in that book, there is a list of required policies that all schools need to have in
Okay.
place. And
Are
then
they on our policy booklet online, or is
the
that?
list of required policies, I don't know that
The
that's,
list probably isn't, but the
The list
policies that
probably
you
is.
have, some of
Right.
those policies you have.
but the
you can-
policies are all
Policies are
online.
Right, yeah, I know that they are, but, I mean, it's not nearly as extensive as really, it didn't seem as extensive as what I see here,
You mean the list of policies online?
yeah.
There should be
for my-
more policies than what are required. We have
Okay.
policies that are not,
Yeah.
like the building use, for example, is not a required
Yeah,
policy.
okay,
But without
have
it,
one.
we struggle to operate because
Okay.
there are guidelines for using the
You
buildings.
probably
for
have a
example.
transportation policy. That is, I don't think that's a recommended one or required, but, that's another example of, one that might be there, so.
I don't think I understand your question fully.
well,
You're
I'm
saying-
just trying to get my head around where I need to be. I mean, obviously, I've been on the school website and I've read through those things. It doesn't stick, but I've read through it. But, where else should I be
I
looking?
think like
and-
as a teacher,
think-
you're asking for a homework list.
It
Well,
could
and
be
it
helpful
helps-
for me.
I think you said A and B for the school board,
A
like
and
that.
B to start.
What
to
is A
start.
and B?
Okay, section A is going to be your foundational policies, it's going to be your affirmative action policy, it's going to be your non-discrimination policies, it's going to be your tobacco use, policy. It's going to be some of those that are going to apply to everybody and everything. Section B is all the policies for school boards.
And those are online.
They're
Yes.
online,
Okay.
and they're
If you
probably
look in
about,
the corner of your policies, it says policy and then it will say BBA.
Okay,
All the A policies will say A as the
Oh,
first
okay.
letter, so those are the
All right.
policies. Yeah,
Okay.
I was
And when you
confused.
look online, if you can't locate them to see, there's a scroll down bar too, so sometimes when it just pops up, it looks like there might just be a few, but if you scroll down, there are quite a few, and
Yeah.
I don't mind showing you.
okay.
access
Yeah,
those.
it's just, I did try to do some of that today, but I'm not sure that I did it right, so,
It's-
okay. Thank you.
there are many.
There are many, so there are many more than are
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
required.
Yeah.
But I think that's pretty typical
It
for
is.
schools.
It is. Section C is going to refer to the superintendent. There's going to be sections that apply to your facilities as well as fiscal responsibilities. Section I has to do with instruction. Section J has to do with students. Section G has to do with personnel. And Section K has to do with community.
Okay.
So those are all listed there and
So-
provide a wealth of information in terms of if these things happen, or if we want to plan for this in a particular way, this is, and policies are written very broadly. Policies are written so that they really cover a wide breadth of circumstances and not specifically to any one circumstance. You may have some administrative procedures, guidelines, or regulations that may be showing up in your policy manual, but those are the administrative procedure or the guideline that would give you kind of the step-by-step directions that support the policy. Well, policies are intended to be broad. They're intended to be more general than specific. Question in the back?
Now, when you say they basically follow the Title 20A for the statutes and stuff, you know? Now, how does that work with, like, 'cause when you take the oath, the first thing that you do is you follow the Constitution, you know, and statutes. So how does the statutes work versus like somebody's like liberty and pursuit of happiness type constitutional rights? You know what I mean? Like, how do they make that connection to where, like, you could be violating somebody's liberties, you know what I mean, but, you know.
That's mostly been determined by case law in terms of situations that have been brought up in terms of how far and what level of protection an individual has as it relates to that. However, the laws of the school in terms of operating, they're going to be making the decisions based on what's in the best interest of students. And so that's their primary decision-making filter. And they're using it based on their interpretation of that, based on both of what they've heard as well as what their understanding is of the law, as well as the guidance and guidelines from, I would say, CDC, as well as from the Department of Education. So there's a whole wealth of information that has to be put into this decision, as well as the conversations that you had. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute, and go to a follow-up question, then I want to move on a little bit too.
Yeah, so like the guidance from the CDC and stuff, that's just like, there's no law saying you have to do what they say, right? Like, that's just, like, is it lawful, like, if say, I don't want to do what the CDC says because I don't think what they're saying is correct at this moment in time? You know,
There are two things there, and of course, we're talking about, a situation that occurred last year and the year before. In most boards were in the situation where they were saying, in absence of strict guidance from the main DOE or by statute, they were voting to follow the guidance of the CDC. And in terms of following the guidance of the CDC, that was their vote, that was their action of the board. And as long as it was the majority of the board, that's the direction of the district, and that's how they would move forward in terms of the vote.
Yeah, well, I only ask because in this particular situation, there's people, some board members figured that that's what they had to do. Like, I know they took the action to do so, but if they think they have to take that action, that's different than, like.
And that may have been their personal feeling or thinking at that particular point in time. And if it was, then that was the direction they took in terms of having the vote. But that's their individual decision. And you have 9 school board members, and you're going to be voting your conscience. You're going to be voting your understanding of the law and the statute as you go ahead and have these conversations. So let me just talk a little bit about board meetings. Because it's really important too. I'm a subscriber of, like you've done here, of having the item on the agenda. And in terms of what I actually would even suggest is having the motion on the agenda. And when I say that, is at least providing the information for people to know, what the conversation is going to be about, and have the motion on the agenda, and then have a place for the second. And so then you end up with the opportunity for a board to be able to have the conversation, the discussion about the motion that's on the table. And so you're knowing what you're discussing, and as board members, and we'll get into this in a little bit in terms of the code of ethics, as board members, it's important for you, yes, to have information that you've gathered before you come to the meeting, and many times that information is going to be coming from the superintendent as one source of your information. It's going to be coming in the form of just information or even a recommendation from the superintendent in terms of a particular item. But for you to enter the conversation, the deliberation of the item on the agenda, with enough of an open mind, with enough flexibility to be able to think that, okay, I'm at this table with 8 other people, and there may be information here that may be valuable for me to hear to be able to identify how I'm going to make up my mind. Be at least flexible enough to know that you're going to be not committed totally to your vote before you actually get to the table. So that the purpose of the deliberation after the motion, after the second, is for other people to be able to express how they feel, what their thinking is, and for you as a board member to be even asking, what is it your thinking is as it relates to a particular item. I often think that it's better to inquire first before you advocate for your position, only to find out in terms of how do you have a respectful conversation amongst the table to be able to know how each other's thinking. and not necessarily just, get out there and have every one of the 9 of you just advocate for your own individual position. Essentially, you're taking a vote just by, stating your position. But, if you can state the motion, make the second, have the conversation, and then, somebody move the question, or, if you've each had 2 times to make a comment, Robert's rules would say, once the motion, once the second's been made, to offer 2 times for each person to speak before you actually, would take a vote, so that you'd have the opportunity for that kind of level of conversation. As you get to know one another, I think it's important that you be able to ensure that, people are taking time to add your voice to the conversation. I often would say too that silence is consent, in terms of if you don't, voice in terms of what your thought is or your opinion is, other people aren't getting to know you as well as they aren't understanding necessarily, what it is you're thinking with regard to a particular action that might be taken on the board. So it's important for you as 9 folks that are forming yourself as a new governance team to be able to respectfully, have conversation amongst yourself on each item that comes before the board. Yes, Jamie?
Yeah, I guess I didn't even know that was possible, that after you made a motion and someone seconded the motion, that there was an opportunity for discussion at a normal board meeting. So that's
where it should happen.
That's where it should happen.
Yeah.
So after they do that, according to Robert's rules, you can then, as a member, ask a question or present something. That would be okay in Robert's rules.
Yeah, and I think
After that.
that's certainly how we try to operate.
No, I know, I just didn't know I could.
Yeah. No, and that's the point, so that's what, and I think one of the things that Steve's describing that would add another layer of clarity is that we're not, in order to function efficiently, we should be discussing items where the majority of the board where there's a motion and a second in order to discuss a topic,
Okay.
rather than just, here, I'm gonna throw this out and we wade into a discussion and 10 minutes into it, it's one person's thing that they wanna talk about and everybody else is kind of responding. If we at least stick to that framework of having a motion and a second, then it's, it's at least that additional layer of formality to it and adherence to Robert's rules as far as, okay, so we're discussing in an orderly.
And the motion might be, motion to consider the superintendent's recommendation to XYZ.
Okay.
Purchase a new bus, provide opportunity for a field trip for, 7th and 8th graders to, go to whatever. And then that's the motion, you have a second, that's on the table, and so that's when you have the conversation, as opposed to what Betsy has described of, here's the topic on the agenda, you have your conversation, you have your discussion, and then somebody gets a flavor for what the discussion is, and then all of a sudden well, I make a motion that we do such and such.
That's what I'm used to seeing, and it is tricky, people sort of search around for a motion.
So that's where part of the planning goes in terms of the board chair and the superintendent, in terms of what do we want the board to discuss? And we don't necessarily, I don't want necessarily the superintendent and the board chair to frame the motion such as it's putting you in a box or in a corner to say, well, no, I can't believe in that, I don't believe in that, so I'm gonna vote no. Because you also can amend motions, in terms of revising what the wording is to be able to get at it, what you really want, the motion to accomplish.
Do you have some samples of, well, I'm just thinking, so they're open-ended without that guidance piece, but yet.
But what I've seen, Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, there are some districts that if they had say they had an agenda like this, they're not necessarily, I've seen at least a couple that just have a spot for a motion and a second, not that there's a suggested motion, that it looked to me more of a reminder that, okay, so we have a topic, we're gonna need a motion and a second, and then discussion happens afterwards.
I've seen both.
Both, and both of those ways are
legit,
are acceptable.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The one that just has, here's a topic, you've got, room for a motion, room for a second, you still have to kind of seek a little bit around in terms of what do you want the motion to be. And there may be times where you're more open-ended than others. I mean, there's gonna be some that you're gonna be pretty cut and dry in terms of what you want the motion to be, because you know what the conversation was. You know, the motion might be to approve a bid for heating fuel. I mean, that might be the motion, and therefore you'd have the quotes that would come in, and so you'd look at the quotes and you'd have a conversation as to, you know, which firm you'd go forward with. And I hope you have already locked in at $1.52 a gallon, right?
I assume we were just talking about Robert's Rules of Order,
Yes,
correct? Not
yes.
necessarily a statute that's overlaying that, right, okay. Yeah.
Now, I assume also there may be a policy in your board section that says that you will abide by Robert's rules. Yeah. So, in terms of that, what I would say is Robert's rules should be your friend and you should know about them. However, I also would say the more complicated or contentious a board meeting might be, or you might anticipate it to be, then the more you might subscribe to Robert's rules. The more relaxed or informal you think, then you can not have that be quite so scripted as you might need it to be in terms of other times. But at least you ought to know in terms of on that continuum where you might anticipate it in needing to be, you know, for a particular meeting, and know the procedures that you'd be using to be able to have that happen for yourselves. Yes.
I just want to say thank you for touching base on all of this, because I came onto the board, we were doing Zoom, that was like my very first, was like when everything had shut down. And so there was it was terrible to try to have discussions with people. I've got to say, thank you for this setup, and I hope that we can continue at Leeds and Green and here, because this lends to me more of a, hey, we can have a dialogue instead of sitting in the auditorium. And it's definitely not for lack of things going on around up here, but it's hard to have discussion in that type of forum and to hear each other. So I think that this
It was an
feels better.
interesting introduction to you all when I started coming, and it was set like that. And I understand why it was like now I understand more about why that is, but I think it definitely, yeah, I think there was definitely a sort of a feeling of everybody sort of in a row, so.
And my introduction was similar, because I came up for a presentation for a superintendent search meeting, and here the board was, you know, across. And it was set up in a positive way of being able to be there to be able to receive input, you know, from the public. And I can understand that for sure. But if you can think about this particular comment, boards meet to do the business of the board. You are the board. So how is it that you can talk to one another if you're 32 feet away and you're trying to operate through microphones or not, and being able to, you know, just sit and talk to one another? To be able to develop some relationships, you know, with one another, to be able to see each other, you know, look at facial expressions, you know, look at how your questions come across to folks. I mean, I think that's really, really important for you to do the business of the board. Boards meet in the public, but their meetings are not of the public. You provide public comment, and that's required by statute in any full meeting of the board. But school board meetings are for you to be able to do the business of the board. And you rely on information you gather from the public. You rely on being able to have opportunity from members of the public to present to you during that public comment period. And just to touch on that public comment period for a little bit, you have the opportunity through statute to devise that, create that however you want. You can have public comment period at the beginning of the meeting. You can have public comment at the end of the meeting. Where you place that on the agenda is your decision. You also can have it in both places. Public comment cannot only, we recommend that it cannot only deal with topics on the agenda. That the law states that public may comment on matters of education and school matters, which is pretty broad. But you can create an overall time frame as well as limit the number of minutes that each speaker might have, dependent upon the number of folks who might be there and the other kinds of business that you might have to do at a board meeting. So you want to be efficient with your meetings in terms of how you create the agenda. It should be set up for efficiency. Yet at the same time for a distinct opportunity for you to be able to discuss and not just vote, but really have that deliberation on important items after a motion's made, a second's made, and then you have that deliberation before a vote's taken. That's the time when you do the good work of the board, because I feel you should be informed board members, and to do that you need information from the superintendent, you need information from other administrators within the district. And you as a board, to be able to vote knowledgeably and in an informed way, you need that information, and then you need to share it with each other, with regard to your deliberations. When I became superintendent, I was amazed at the number of meetings. Yes, they wanted efficient meetings, and their goal was, we can be out of here in 42 minutes. No, we can be out in 36 minutes. As opposed to, what's the work of the board? What's the important conversation that needs to be had? Now, it was one of those situations where you have to be careful what you ask for, because that was the board also that later on they identified that they needed to set a 2-hour limit for meetings. So they had to vote after 9 o'clock if it was started at 7. They had to vote if they were going to take another item up after 9 o'clock. So you want to be efficient. You want to provide the opportunity for members of the public to be able to have a chance to be able to inform you as to what their thinking is. And you want to be able to respect the opportunity for the minority of folks that may be wanting to express themselves as it relates to some level of dissent, perhaps, with a particular item. So we've covered a lot in the last 15 minutes in terms of, not gone sequentially through the paperwork, but I hope that's helped some. Getting to this slide in terms of roles of the board and roles of the superintendent, as I mentioned before, you do have different tasks. The board really is thinking about, if you think about a big question, it's really the what. Board should be concerning yourselves with the what. What is it you want your graduate to look like? What's the profile of a graduate as they leave high school? What does a middle school experience look like for your students? What do we want for learning opportunities for our pre-K to 5th grade students? And so you're asking the what, why, and how much questions as a board. You're going to try to find out how much is it going to cost to provide the resources that are going to be necessary to be able to do that. So you're at this, like I said, 20,000-foot level to be able to say, how are we going to be able to do this? The superintendent, on the other hand, is really looking at, okay, the means or the how. She's also going to be interested in the what, because she's going to help you in that particular area. But once the rubber hits the road, she's going to try to figure out, how are we going to get this done? And she and I were talking about hiring, of candidates here coming in. That's of concern to her as we get ready for the school year. She's going to be asking how, when, where, and by whom. So she's going to be making recommendations to you. You're going to take that recommendation, you're going to discuss it, you're going to have deliberations about it, and then you're going to vote. And then once that vote's taken, she's going to take that action required by the vote and go back, and now she's going to implement that. And so it's really a back and forth process where the superintendent is interacting with you as a board to make things happen for the district. All of that, and I come down to the very bottom couple of words on this particular slide. As I talked before about you coming together and working together as a board, you're the governing board. Together with the superintendent, you're the education leaders of the district. She's the educational CEO of the district, and you've delegated that responsibility to her by hiring her. But together, you're the you're the educational team. And so it's important that as you work together through open, honest, transparent, and communication that has integrity with it, so that you're sharing information that is of value to you in your decision making, that leads to trust amongst yourself, as well as trust with the superintendent in terms of making those decisions and the actions that are carried out. as you work together, one of those things you want to continue to develop is making deposits into that trust bank. And so that you continue to develop a level of confidence as well as competence in what's going on within the district. You want to be thinking about yourself in terms of your own board actions and the confidence and competence that you create as a team, as well as the confidence and competence that you see in the superintendent as she begins to have impact on the district and work within her role. One of the things I haven't talked about, but I would like to mention right now, in terms of the number of people who are new around this table, as much as you can, you should be working together to be able to support your superintendent. She's been in this role 5 weeks or so, but part of your role is to help with the onboarding or the transition, the positive transition of the success for her as she comes into the district. Mm-hmm. So that means, what can you do to be able to support the efforts for good things happening within the school district? So that's as a board as well as individuals, just to make sure that the support is there to be able to assure good things are happening. That doesn't mean you can't ask questions. That doesn't mean that you want to inquire about how things are going. It's not just giving her a carte blanche in terms of say, go to it. We'll check in 6 months to see how things are going. But to be able to say, what is it you need to be able to have this, the district be successful, and how can we help you to be able to make that happen? You want this to be a long-term relationship. You want to be working together as a team to say, how can we as an educational team be successful in making this effort work together? And it's not as 9 individuals and 2 administrators at the table, but it's really the 11 of you identifying what is it that we need to do to make this a successful both entry as well as a long-term effort. And you ought to be thinking about this as, we're in this for the long term. What is it that we need to do to make sure that this is going to work? And you do that by strong and clear communication as well as developing trust. You do have in your policy, policy BDD, which is the board superintendent relationship. At a general level, this talks about that you're functioning as a board at the legislative function. Policy making, your most important responsibility. You also help set the direction for the school unit and evaluate progress toward the goals. So as a board, I would think in terms of that calendar I spoke of before, that you would ask the assistant superintendent and superintendent to bring to you information about progress of the schools. I've seen and seen very successfully done, and I know Carrie's participated in some of these in terms of state of the school reports that get shared with the school board in terms of how are students doing. What's the state of our facilities? What's the state of our curriculum adoptions and materials that we're using? So those are the kinds of things that you as a board are responsible for in making sure that they're sharing information with you. However, the management of the schools is to the superintendent and the people that she designates to do the work underneath her. And so this policy helps guide that little bit of separation that happens between you as the board as well as what the superintendent should be responsible for. You've got this same slide as a handout. And I shared the next piece, number 7, with Carrie actually yesterday at that meeting, which really is a communications agreement, which really helps identify what is it that you as a board need from the superintendent to be able to feel like communications are going well. What do you need to be able to do your work, and when do you need it? The lower section is a similar type thing, but it speaks to what the superintendent might need from you to be able to have her job be more easily done. In both instances, I will point out at the bottom of each list it talks about no surprises. And that's so important in terms of developing trust as well as having clear communication. So if you have something you want talked about at a board meeting, don't wait till the board meeting to bring that up. Pick up the phone, call the superintendent and say, I've got this question, when and how can we talk about it? Call the board chair and do the same thing, to make sure that the two of them have the information that you feel is important for the board to consider. And the same thing for the superintendent. As much as possible, the superintendent's going to make sure you have the information you need to be able to talk about at a meeting before you need to take action on it. There are going to be sometimes, some very limited times, where information might have to come through a revised agenda or through some other addition to the agenda where something is time sensitive, and so something needs to happen at that particular moment in time. But for the most part, information will be shared with you early enough so that you have that level of information. Any questions about anything that we've talked about so far here? Then the next piece really is, we talked before about the policies being your foundation and your owner's manual. The next piece is handout number 8, which is your MSAD 52 school board ethics. Now you have A through 11. I think that's 13 different statements. And essentially, it's a series of I will statements. And yes, I'd say they're aspirational, but in essence, this is where you would say, this is how I will make promises to each other in terms of how I will respond and react and contribute in a respectful manner to the work of the board. And if you can read these and think about how this will help with regard to the important teamwork that you'll be doing as a governance team, you can see how these will contribute. Now, that's not to say that everything's going to be a 9-0 vote. You may have 5-4, you may have 6-3, you may have 7-2, whatever. But all of that work should be done in a respectful manner in terms of honoring the position of another person and understanding too that you're talking about topics that are on the table. And I also like this arrangement because you can almost maybe envision it's the topic that's in the middle of the table that you're talking about. It's not, an individual that you're going against necessarily because of their position. But you're thinking and talking about a topic that's going to have some impact one way or the other on students or staff or on the organization. And so if that can be the focus of how you have your conversations, then I think you'd be very helpful in thinking about, okay, how can we use the board member ethics in a positive way to be able to help support your work. So things like, I would view my service on the board as an opportunity to serve my community. I think that's really important, and I would say it's not only your community, I think it's your state, I think it's the country, as I think about what we need to be doing in terms of our students in this particular way. You have the opportunity, it's your community school in terms of how you can help shape and help form, inform citizens, for us to be able to continue the role, once we leave this table and once they're in our seats, how are they going to carry on, what we started for them. I'll make no disparaging remarks in or out of the board meetings about employees, members of the board, or their opinions. What I don't see, or yes I do. E has become a combination of statements, 2 statements that are on other boards' code of ethics. But I would look at the second sentence of E first, and matter of fact, in many other cases, this had been letter B. I will at all times think of children first and base my decisions on how they will affect children and their education.
Yep.
If you can use that as your filter, as your first filter, in terms of what it is you're doing with regard to your conversations and your decisions, I think that's an ultimate goal for you. The next piece really speaks of how you're responsible for all children. The first sentence in E, I will seek to provide education for all children in the community commensurate with their needs and abilities. All kids, commensurate with their needs and abilities. What is it that they need? How can we provide it? What's it going to take to provide it? F, I will listen to all citizens, but will refer all complaints for resolution in accordance with established board policy. Now, board policy, I'm going to guess, let's take a look at that for a minute. I think it's going to be like number 17 in your handout. Yes. Number 17 is public concerns and complaints. This is an important policy for you because, number one, you're going to be contacted by people in the community and they're going to have an expectation, or at least a hope, that you're going to listen and you're going to take care of something. You're going to make sure it happens. Well, it's important for you to listen to that concern or that complaint, but also be respectful and also ask them to work back through the policy. And many times, this is one of the policies that districts either put directly on their website, so that people don't have to scroll down through it, or they also put it on a welcome brochure that they may have for their school board meetings. So that, welcome to our school board meeting, this is how we operate, this is these are the members of the school committee, and here are a few policies that may be of interest as you consider the work of the district. But this essentially requests that people who have a concern or a complaint to make sure that they try to address it at the lowest possible level. Meaning that, if it's something in the classroom, that they speak with the teacher. If it's something within the school, then they speak with the principal. It shouldn't come to the board level as a board item until it's had the chance to be able to work up through the system in terms of teacher, principal, superintendent, and then coming to you as a board. So in that particular way, you're a good listener, but you're also a good redirector in terms of assuring that the people have the opportunity to be able to be heard by the person who might be able to do something at the lowest possible level. If it can't be resolved at any other lower level, it may be taken to the superintendent. If the complaint remains unresolved at the super's level, the person making the complaint may request that the matter be placed on the agenda of the next regular school meeting. But as in the policy, it says the complaint may, or the person making the complaint may request that the matter be placed on the agenda. It doesn't automatically say that that item will be on the agenda. The next sentence says the superintendent board shall determine whether the complaint should be placed on the agenda. So there's still some latitude there in terms of agenda making as to where or not that item should be resolved. All written verbal complaints should be filed, conducted in a respectful tone. The district will not respond to sarcastic, intimidating, threatening, or rude communications. The district will refer all threats against any district personnel to law enforcement. Persons who engage in inappropriate or disruptive communications may be required to cease such communications. Persons disrupting or interfering with school operations may be ordered to leave premises, and if they do not, they may be subject to law enforcement and legal action. So, this really, from a very little lower level complaint, all the way up to, boy, this is serious. That's where KE allows you to go with regard to how things could be taken care of and hopefully resolved at the lowest possible level. And this has been reviewed a number of different times, revised and reviewed most recently December of 2020. So that's KE. As it relates to, on your code of ethics, letter F. G talks about what I mentioned before. I'll make decisions openly after all facts bearing on a question have been presented and discussed. Once a decision has been made by the majority of the board, I will abide by that decision. And essentially that means don't go out in the public and sabotage the decision by the board after it's been made. Your code of ethics would say that you would at least abide by the decision. Now, if someone were to ask you, okay, well, how did you vote on that? I didn't think that you were in favor of that. You can say, no, I didn't vote in favor of that. But the vote of the board at the night of the meeting, this was the vote of the board. And so, that's the fact of the case. Your meetings are televised typically. Mm-hmm. So, people are going to know, what the vote is. They can go back and they can view it if they want, or they can see the vote, although the people aren't listed on the minutes, they can see what the vote was. H is really, really important. I will discuss the confidential business of the board only at board meetings and with authorized individuals. Confidential information is just that. It's private, and it only can be talked about within executive session at a board meeting. And it doesn't give you the authority to go and talk with a board member outside the boardroom about what happened within the confidential executive session. So that's really, really important. K, I will endeavor to attend every regular and special board meeting, and we talked about the reasons why that's important. I will abide by federal, state, and local laws and regulations during my term of services. Again, that's an expectation as a board member that you will abide by the code of ethics. So we've talked a lot about ethics. We've talked a lot about superintendent and board responsibilities, ethics and practice. Just real briefly, role of the chair, as I mentioned before, they're the planner, the organizer, the spokesperson, the delegator, meaning that you're trying to identify who would be on committees. They're the liaison and confidant. If you have questions, and especially new board members, don't wait for a board meeting to ask a question if you have it. I would say, I would encourage a phone call to Betsy, a phone call to Carrie, your superintendent and your board chair, to be able to ask your question and be able to get some answers before you actually get to a board meeting. That'll help your information and help your consideration within the deliberation process of your meeting. They can help with a guide for new board members as well as be a caretaker of relationships. This is one that I would mention, really, really important, especially as you're coming onto the board. Just begin to know your lane. And part of that, you're going to have to kind of feel it out as you go. But again, I've said this before, recognize your responsibility is not to operate the schools, but to see that they are well operated. Your responsibility is oversight. It's not supervision. The superintendent's responsibility is supervision, and then she also delegates that supervision to other people, within the district, principals and other directors. Your job is to make sure that you both supervise as well as evaluate the superintendent. Now, here's one thing that I would recommend, and Betsy and Karen and I have talked a little bit about this before, but I would recommend that your evaluation, your supervision of the superintendent happen in kind of a periodic manner where you might, on a quarterly basis, just have an executive session of the board to be able to talk about the duties of personnel. And that conversation within executive session, would be to just do a check-in with the superintendent. How are things going? Are there things that you need to share with us in terms of things that we need to know about in terms of how the district needs to be going? As well as for her to say, okay, well, how do you think I'm doing? What are the things that you're seeing that are going well? Are the things that you're seeing perhaps that I could pay attention, in a greater way? Especially that's thinking about the communication aspects of things. But I would say this is one of the ways of being able to help the transition, to make sure that you're being supportive of what the role is and what is needed. She's the only superintendent in the district, so it's a lonely position in terms of doing her work. She also wants feedback in terms of how are things going. So the opportunity to do that before you get to the formal evaluation cycle, which might be 12 months from now, don't wait for that period of time to go by. Build in some check-ins just to make sure that it seems like it's more of a supervisory role than it is, okay, well, here's the evaluation, this is what you did, this is what you didn't do, and try to do better the next year. Really provide some of those benchmarks along the way. And my guess is, in terms of her entry plan, in terms of her ideas that she has as she enters the district, she's already identified certain goals that she wants to have. And you've talked with her, or the superintendent, the board chair has, in terms of things that need to be paid attention to as she starts her work within the district. But that would be one way that I would say, in terms of you are playing an oversight role of the district, you're playing a supervisory role as well as an evaluative role with her as an employee, your only employee. That makes sense? So sometimes school boards get into conflict, and hopefully you won't be here, and hopefully you'll pay attention to what is it we can do to be able to work together. But sometimes board members, if you don't stay in your lane, and when I say stay in your lane, think about your work as a board member versus taking on the role of a superintendent. If you get caught in veering out of that lane, sometimes it causes problems for the rest of the board and the rest of the district. Making sure that you remember that individuals, including chairs, have no individual authority, that you only have authority as the board. Try to eliminate or not pay attention to any individual agendas. It should be agendas of the board that you want to consider and not individual agendas. And try to have proper regard for meeting protocol. The public really pays attention to how boards function. And the more functional you appear, the greater confidence that is bred, within the community. And so that's one of those things in terms of how can you use Robert's rules to help you? How can you use your board norms and your ethics in terms of working with each other to see about presenting that cohesive, working together group team that you want to be. Freedom of Access Act. I'm going to talk about this as it relates to email, but also just in terms of knowing anything that you write, anything that you exchange with each other can be considered a public record and also be viewed as viewed within a request for a Freedom of Access Act request. So that relates to email, that relates to text, that relates to other means of social media as well. So as this relates to you as a board member, you're essentially a board member 24/7. You're viewed, once you're elected, you're on the school board. You're on the board of directors. So anything that you write and gets shared, number one, it has a reflection on you as an individual, yes, but it also has a reflection on you as a board member. It also has a reflection on you as a district. So that's one of the things that I would ask you to consider in terms of thinking about your use of social media. That number one, you can't and shouldn't be, the only spokesperson for the board is the chair, or if delegated to the superintendent. So as an individual, you can't be speaking on behalf of the board. So if you're making any statement on social media, you should be identifying yourself as an individual, that it's not you speaking as a board member. And therefore, thinking about anything that you state, even though it's stated that way, people are still going to say, well, wait a minute, he's making or she's making that statement. Is that really as an individual, or is that, I've heard that person speak, as a board member, with that particular statement. So it's hard for people to separate, your role as an individual and your role as a board member. So it's just one of those filter points that I would ask you to consider as you're thinking about your use of social media. The other part, anything, as I said, this right-hand corner up here, anything that you write would be regarded as a public record. And we've seen in cases where texts have been brought up, the last 30 days of texts have been considered, within a Freedom of Access Act request. The other thing about that is making sure that you're not using staff names, student names, initials in any emails, because that could be considered, if it got in the wrong hands, it could be considered, confidential information that or private information that shouldn't be shared with other people. So very important in that particular way. I know as board members, you needed to, if you haven't already, training is required within 120 days of you receiving the oath of office. And the certificate that you get after you've completed that training should be housed in the superintendent's office, so we have a record of that. That's for people newly elected. It's also, for anybody that's newly elected. So whether you're a renewal or whether or not you're first time elected. So that needs to be done. Record of completion, and I assume that the superintendent is the public access officer. Yeah. Okay.
Quick question on that.
Yes.
The basis of being able to acquire someone's text messages is if it involved district business?
Yes.
Right? So as long as you don't text district business, period.
Correct.
There's no basis for.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. So
I'm just feeling like how if someone just wants to come jump into 30 days of my text, that sounds like
Oh my.
it would be a request made on a particular topic.
Sure.
And then you each as board members would be asked, do you have texts or emails as it relates to this particular topic? And there would be a time period or so identified, and then you'd have to look and produce them if you had them. And if there were things that need to be redacted because of privacy issues, then they could be redacted. But yeah. So this goes to the trust with the community piece. How you conduct yourself and your business in the public eye goes a long way in determining your credibility and support in the community. And again, the more respect you can develop and sustain amongst yourselves, then the better it is for you as a district. We talked about complaints, we talked about public policy, public participation, Robert's rules. For you as a board, and I know you're, I would say you're kind of a younger board working toward maturity as a board, but I think it's important for you as a board to think about, are there goals that you can set for yourself? Do you have expectations for yourself as a board? How do you see yourself working together as a board? Do you espouse that all children can learn? Do you have that belief? Is your focus on student achievement? Is your focus on collaborating and communicating? Are you data savvy, meaning are you using information that the district has collected to be able to provide to you to help in your decision making? Are your goals and your resources aligned? Meaning, okay, so you've got these goals, you've got this pot of money, or you've got these facilities you're using, are they in sync with helping you achieve the goals that you have? Do you have the amount of resources you need to be able to help support the goals you've identified? Are you paying attention to team leadership, and are you involved in team training like tonight? You know, don't let this be a one spot stop to be able to do your team training. And I did include, I think it's one of the last handouts that you have, a sample policy from MSAD considering a school board self-evaluation. And the self-evaluation is important if you've identified and created some goals for yourself. This is number 21. If you've identified what are some things that we want to work toward for this next year. And if you identify those goals that you want to work toward, can you identify a time later in the year, maybe the summertime, early summer, where you take a look, how did we do with regard to these goals? And maybe even do a midpoint check to say, okay, we've identified goals, how are we doing on it? Now, something to share, and it's number 9, I think, in your handout. This is a simple Robert Rules of Order motions chart. I mean, that's on one side. But for me, more importantly, it has some questions on the borders, on the columns, on the sides of these. So on the Roberts Rules side, there's some questions about the board. What role does the superintendent play during board meetings? So there's a little bit of a response to that. How is voting done at board meeting? When does the board chair vote? Can a member of the board, school board vote by proxy at board meetings? When must I recuse myself from voting? Are there questions that should be avoided during public sessions? And the response to that one is you should avoid asking or answering questions at a public board meeting that would divulge confidential information protected by law. On the other side, on the right-hand side, always ask, in thinking about these questions, what impact will this decision have on students? How does this decision help us reach our district goals? No data and research, do data and research support this decision? What supports will be needed to ensure results from, so these are kind of just decision filters, you know, that can be considered. Some people have used this or a sample of this, and I would say also your code of ethics, you know, could be inserted right here in the middle of it. That would be MSAD 52s. And on the right-hand side down at the bottom of that, board meeting evaluation questions. Did we spend our time on what matters most? Did all board members have an opportunity to be heard? Did we have adequate information on all topics? Did we consider the expertise of staff and the data and needs of our district? Did each of us make clear the rationale behind our decisions? Did we treat each other with respect? Did we follow appropriate rules of the meeting procedure and decorum? Did we welcome community or staff observers as valued guests? Did we offer recognition to celebrate the accomplishments of student, staff, or volunteers? Did we commit time to our own learning to support informed decision-making? So I offer this as a means of trying to think about development of you as a board. what is it that can happen to be able to help the growth of each of you as individual board members and then together as a team, as a board. And the school board self-evaluation is an opportunity, just like you'd expect the superintendent to set goals and report to you in terms of how she's doing on those goals. And just like she would expect the same thing of other staff who work for her, including principals and teaching staff. It's good for the board to be able to think about, setting some goals for yourself and then doing a self-evaluation of how are we doing as a board to be able to demonstrate our own growth, as a board. So that's the essence of information for tonight. I could go on and on and on. You probably would wish I wouldn't. You have other things to be doing as well. Are there other questions you have as it relates to any of the topics we covered, or things you wished we might have covered?
I'll just go back to 7, which was the
Communications?
Communication agreement. Yeah, did we have one? MSAD 52?
We
No, this is
don't,
just a sample
we
one?
don't have
Okay.
a stated sort of agreement, no.
Okay.
This is really helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else? Then, for me, if you could take, I know you got another thing to work on, but there is a short little feedback form on the left-hand side of the packet. You could maybe just take a minute and give me some information as to how I might do another time around and help in our planning.
And just so board members know as well, I think it's been 5 years or so since we've done one of these. I mean, obviously as the makeup of the board changes, and it's really taking direction from the board. Is it something we'd want to do in this manner again? Is there some other topic that we'd like to delve into in more detail? I mean, that's certainly, Maine School Management has those resources, and as Steve said, he's shared this nice light reading sort of resource as well, so if we.
I wish that came in a pamphlet.
Yeah, exactly, small laminated.
You want Spark
notes?
Just get that.
Exactly.
Condense that a little bit.
Just if folks could kind of keep that in the back of your mind, if there's something that we touched on tonight, or if there's something else as we go along in our activities that seems like it would be helpful to keep, getting more resources on, that's
As people are filling these out, we do have regional meetings. We have 3 scheduled right now, 1 in September, 1 in March, 1 in May. We'll get the March and May dates out, but the ones in September, we'll get especially to the new members. But the regional meetings provide an opportunity for you to be able to come together with other members from other boards. They're virtual, meaning you don't have to leave your house to be able to attend. They're typically 6 to 7:30, so that it's also during an evening time, and hopefully it's not on a night that you also have a board meeting. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that was just one bit that we have on it.
No, Jody.
Oh, you did it right.
No, well, I think that's all right, sure. Everybody else, anybody else still have more feedback?
Thank you, Kyle.
Do you have a long drive?
Maybe an hour, exactly.
Okay.
Thanks again, Steve, and we will certainly continue to use you folks as a resource, and as we go, we need,
Please stay in touch, and we will as well.
yeah.
Is there a fee that's involved with this? It's all part of it?
Oh, there is.
There is,
Yeah.
there is a small fee.
Oh, sorry,
Separate
yes,
one.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
So for every time we if we brought them back in a couple of years, instead of waiting 5 years, bring
Yeah.
them back,
Yeah, it's, I wanna say it was like $300.
Yeah,
or
$395.
something. Right,
$300.
as
plus tax.
a lodging, travel, the whole 9 yards, yeah. Absolutely. Well, thanks again for that. And as Steve is packing up, if he's not terribly
I won't be distracted, so keep on going.
excellent, thanks, we'll move along on our agenda. We are hopping back into the annual organizational meeting component of the meeting, and Anthony, I think you need a little tiny
Oh,
book
do you
of.
have extras?
Yep, I had two.
Oh, and Cheryl, let me hand one to you.
Yes.
This is your little ballot packet.
Nice.
We already
I
did the
know,
board
it's-
chair, so
I think
I'll
we
read
have-
that for you.
Approximately 500 years worth of these somewhere in the office because they're tiny little pieces of paper. So at this point, we are at item number 4, and I would entertain nominations for vice chair.
May I nominate Jessica Nichols, even though she's not here, for vice chair?
You may. She's not here to defend
She can't
herself.
defend herself.
I don't know if she'd appreciate that.
No. But
Yeah,
I
she
think,
probably-
Well, I'm gonna nominate Crystal.
oh, kind of events.
So at this point, we have Jessica and we have Crystal. And any nominee you may certainly decline.
Except for Chris.
Except for
Crystal, 'cause
Jessica,
she's
she's not here to defend herself. Any other nominations?
My assumption is Jessica wants to do this.
No,
Your
I have not
assumption
talked to
was-
Jessica.
All
No, I
right.
did not talk to Jessica. I
Okay.
have full faith in Jessica that she could,
But she is not aware.
but she is not aware that I have made her a nominee.
How many years has Jessica been on the board?
6?
I think so.
She said 6.
Second, yeah,
And
she's
you're
at the end of.
I'm on
Finishing
my
your
third.
third?
Yes.
Thank you.
Important background information.
Exactly.
Just pointing out, this is my first meeting.
Yes.
So there are no questions that are silly questions. Any other nominations? If not, I would entertain a motion to cease nominations.
So moved.
We have a motion to
Second.
cease and a second to cease nominations. So our next step is to fill out these handy dandy little written ballots for board vice chair. And Mary will collect those.
I wrote stuff down for minutes.
Fantastic.
We did that to somebody else one year. Somebody wasn't there. I think it was like Carlos ended up being like the finance.
It might have been Jess. You guys did this to
There
Jess.
are 5 for Jessica and 3 for Crystal. So the question is whether or not you think we need to go to the super secret.
Super secret wind speed waiting.
Yeah.
We certainly can, if you would like
Try
to
it out.
work through that and see
Oh,
how,
jeez.
see how it
Did I
works.
suggest that?
In a nice low stress sort of setting.
Yeah, we're gonna do it together.
Okay.
Let's just do
What
it.
what's
Sure,
this?
like
See
a
how it
team.
works. We'll do the
Yeah.
weighted vote just to see how it works.
Oh, yeah, gotcha.
Right?
Since
For
each
something
board
on
member,
this? Do you
based
want
on
me to
which town
practice?
you're from.
We'll practice.
Thanks,
Right,
Steve.
you fill it out and I'll
Thank
tell
you,
you.
Steve.
if
so
it's
much.
changed.
Good night, drive
Jamie-
carefully.
Jamie Johnson voted for Crystal.
Do you want me to just take those? Are we reading them out
Yeah.
loud?
We don't have to read them out.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Do you need a calculator?
Yeah, because everybody's vote is weighted differently for
Yeah.
each town. So yours are 115, I
Okay.
think, 115, and there's 4 of you.
So.
And
Except one
so
of us
hold on.
isn't here.
And it's not-
One of you is not here, correct?
Was 117. Oh, please.
So
It's exciting.
it's a combined 117 for green.
No,
Mm-mm.
each
Per
board, so
vote.
your,
person.
yeah,
Each-
so your
each
vote
vote
is
is worth that
117,
much.
like
Yeah.
each of our Turner members, their vote's 115.
Yeah.
Each of our Leeds members are 94.
95.
Yeah, so like Turner's more than one, Green is more than one, and we're less than one. That's really.
Yes.
It feels-
You're less.
Feels a
Feels
little
a little
deflating.
The little
but-
redheads. stepchildren of
Are you
the
leaving?
district, yes.
Some kids are really-
Yes, 2 leaves, 3 and 4, correct.
Yeah, so what she was saying is like, if you don't show up to a meeting, it's not like Brooke can get your points,
Right.
so
Yeah,
you're,
it's,
you don't, not that you don't count, but you know.
What's your last name, Crystal?
Ferris.
Paris.
Yeah.
Wanna announce it?
I don't know, I think we should. I did the tabulations.
So Crystal received a weighted vote of 326. Jessica received 558.
I'm sorry.
So Jessica is the
Vice chair.
vice chair, okay?
Congratulations.
Should we just make her
Jessica.
the vice chair of everything?
Well, we have another opportunity here with the finance committee, and I guess so as we go into the different committees, I would share with folks what our committee makeup has been previously with what we have for remaining members that have been on before, and finance is unique in its format in that all 3 members of the finance committee are elected by the board. The first member that is elected serves as chair of that committee. Our most recent members of the committee were Jessica, Kathy, Carey, and Yuri. So, every organizational meeting, it's a new ability to nominate folks, but those were our most recent members on that.
So does that mean Jessica is still, because she's the only member remaining?
No, I just share that as a point of information, not, this is a new, it's a new organizational meeting, you have the ability to nominate whomever you wish. I just thought as we're all kind of piecing together what things look like historically.
And the
anyone
finance
has a-
committee is the only subcommittee that has each member nominated and voted on.
Yep,
The other
correct.
committees are more by
I'll do that.
other such arrangements.
volunteer.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Volunteer, voluntold, however,
Okay.
yeah, exactly, general
Yeah.
agreement as
And
to
does
what
each
you're-
board member need to be on a committee?
I don't think we have a policy that
Okay.
specifically stipulates that. I think as kind of a matter of expectation as to how to divide the work up, it works great if that's the case. But
Am I right to assume that the finance committee has a really, really big job?
yeah, I think that's a good question. The finance committee's duties tend to be a little bit more formalized in that the business manager would bring to the finance committee the reporting on each, as we close out each month. The finance committee would have the ability.
Each month?
Yeah, I mean, it
Okay.
ends up being, sometimes there'll be 2 or 3 lumped together, but the finance committee would have advance information around that, the ability to review that prior to coming to the full board with okay, so the finance committee's discussed this and found no
So what else do they
missing
do then?
information.
So they sit in and they listen to monthly?
So the way the subcommittee meetings have worked in the past is that typically finance and plant transportation have met kind of an alternating board meeting nights that meet at 5 or 5:30, depending on when the board meets. So, it isn't, when we think of the finance committee's responsibilities, we're a small board of 9, so it isn't as if the finance committee is off operating on its own. The finance committee might see if I know Steve mentioned kind of chucklingly on, if there was a contract for fuel or something like that. So the finance committee might have that information as part of their committee work and then would come to the full board with a recommendation that, geez, our business manager had these 3 options, described them, recommended this, we talked about it, had some questions. The finance committee is certainly, since it's 3 members, they're not taking any actions on behalf of the board. What they would do is come to the board with some sort of recommendation, perhaps based on information that they had. The way we've tried to handle subcommittee work, again, we're a board of 9, it's not like we're a board of 20, and it's really, in order for the board to function, a lot of the work has to be chunked up a lot into subcommittees to make it work. If there are issues that really are going to need full board benefit from full board participation, it comes onto a full board agenda. There isn't really any need to have the same discussion twice. It kind of goes back to that efficiency piece. If the general consensus is that, whether it's anything from a fuel tank or something else that might be discussed in a subcommittee for some initial information, if it's something that the full board's going to discuss in more depth, it will likely proceed pretty quickly to a full board agenda. So I'm not sure if I really answered your question on the finance committee's duties, but they tend to be more specific in that review of how are we proceeding on our expenditures and versus the warrant. It might be something specific like a contract or like a bid sort of.
And if something comes up, like if there's I feel like sometimes plant and transportation and finance get review of certain things. Like if there's a roof that collapses and it needs to be repaired,
Right.
it probably, that won't happen, don't worry, it probably will be reviewed by both,
watch the
or
roofs this
like
winter.
finance. I know if there have been additional positions that have been required, like if we have an increase in students and we need an additional teacher that's not been budgeted for, that gets discussed at finance. I think those are the,
And a lot of
Need to
times,
transfer money
right,
between lines or something if that's necessary.
yeah, and a lot of times those discussions end up surfacing additional questions that would be helpful for the board to have information on for a more complete discussion for those things, so hopefully that answers your question. kind of.
but each of the subcommittees typically only meets once a month, if that.
Yeah.
So that's really what the commitment
And
is, I think, in
Yep.
terms of,
And these are the other ones that are listed under 6, the other committees.
Yep.
yes.
Are we allowed to ask if any board members have like a background in finance and they feel like they may have something to offer for that committee?
Good one.
I think you certainly should. I mean, I think from yeah, absolutely. We're all new enough to this and new enough to getting to know one another. I think it would be silly to just pick names out of a hat and say, I think that the first name should be whatever.
Okay.
So, having said that, though, I mean, if we do it in kind of an orderly sort of way, we can start with Crystal and go around, and if anybody wants to share finance background that they have that they feel
Oh,
would.
I have like 0. That's not to say that I wouldn't be on the committee. Poor Jessica. Man, I would like her to be on this board, whether she's the chairperson or not, just to have another person who was here for last school season, and might have some understanding of some things that might have been going on and progress with regards to some of our outstanding projects that are going on around the district. So I would love to see her still on that.
Well, so we'll have those agenda items that give us
Okay,
the
but
ability to
yeah, and
nominate those, but-
I don't have any finance other than like home.
Thank you. Tammy?
Same for me, home finance, but
Anthony?
I do have some budgetary experience, managing grants, the library budget. I do not think any of this makes me qualified to be the chair of this committee.
But maybe more.
Full disclosure.
Yeah.
Joe?
Well, I do run a business, and part of my job is consulting on large construction projects. So there's many, parallels there. But again, of all the committees, it really was not one that I was thinking I wanted to be on. But I'd be willing to do it.
Too bad.
It's just a question. I mean, has anyone else been on the finance committee other than Jessica?
Betsy, but
Yeah.
just as,
Just, right.
The ex
You have-
yes,
okay.
ex officio.
But you're not on any committees because you're the chair.
Right, so
Or you're on all the committees.
Right.
Okay.
basically, that one.
Yeah.
Jamie?
Nope, not even home.
Kyle?
I'm a vice president of a construction company and deal with finance all the time, but I'm not that guy.
You might be now.
Yeah.
And we know Brooke is like a closeted like accountant over here and.
Yeah, I do run a business. I do run, the financial aspect of that as well as of my home. So I do have, some knowledge, I guess. Enough that I could, probably manage, but
And
I
just-
have background.
Right.
I am
You're studious, right?
I am 3 courses away from completing my business degree, which obviously obviously includes accounting and finance and stuff. But
Great. Okay. these
So,
folks.
can I just add, I mean, we do have a new business manager starting August 22nd. I think it will be important for her to feel like she's got some partners in the board, so I think there's a lot of opportunity here to work with her and build her confidence, because the more consistent business manager person we have in that role, the better off all of us will be, because the turnover's had an impact. So
I would make
just
her
say
feel
that out
really
loud.
smart by asking all of the questions and to reaffirm her that she knows exactly what she's talking about, because, I mean, yeah.
I mean, is there anybody that would want the position?
As chair,
Yeah.
I know Jess doesn't want it. I don't know if that matters.
So let's go on to that agenda item, and hopefully some of this discussion was helpful as far as people crystallizing their thoughts just a little bit. I would entertain a nomination for first member and chair of the finance committee.
I'm gonna nominate Jessica. I'm the only person that has experience on the committee. That's my logic.
Can you, if she didn't want it, like she wanted to, we could at some point vote a new person in.
We have an organizational meeting every year.
Yeah.
I mean, there's certainly that. I mean, I think the only thing that feels a little awkward about that is she's not here to defend herself, kind of thing. So, I mean, it isn't, having said that, it's, the chair is responsible for reporting out for the committee. The chair is.
Fine, I
has
threw her under
some-
the bus. I can nominate myself for that then. You're absolutely right. Like, that person is not making a unilateral decision. That person, nobody in that, it's just speaking at these board meetings about
None
what
of
we
them.
talked about.
Yeah,
And
none of the
Okay.
committees are.
Just as a reminder, let's get in the habit of making sure that the chair recognizes before we hands and recognize. I mean, I think this is a better discussion scenario, but I mean, Steve's points were good. If we're in the habit of handling things in a certain manner, then it is less apt to, well, how come you guys are all twitchy about how you do this now? It's just how we always do things, and it's not any particular scenario. So at this point, we have nomination for Jessica, unless the person that nominated her wants to withdraw that. I wasn't 100% certain from that.
I mean, I nominated her, but I don't know her well enough to know how adamantly she doesn't want to do this. It sounds like people that know her know that she doesn't want to do this, but she's the only one that makes sense from an experience standpoint here to do this. So that's why I nominated her.
Do we have other nominees?
I'll nominate Crystal.
So we have Jessica and Crystal as nominees for first member and chair of Finance Committee. Do we have other nominees? Do we have Anthony?
I'll nominate Brooke.
So we have Brooke, Crystal, and Jessica. Any other nominations? If not, I would entertain a motion to cease nominations.
I make a motion that we cease nominations.
We have a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. So you know the drill. We have the ballots that you can fill out in the same, yes.
As a
Teresa.
point of reference, when I looked back at the minutes from last year, we
Mhm.
did then take a vote after the first and second. Like, all those in favor?
Oh, okay, yes,
Just,
okay.
you know, we skipped
Yeah.
all those in favor, unless we want to continue to do it this way, and I apologize that I didn't catch
Okay.
that sooner.
Yes, and I apologize as well. So we could backtrack and just do all those in favor of ceasing nominations? Is that what you're, all those in favor of ceasing nominations? It appears to be unanimous that we have ceased, it appears duly ceased. So if folks are. And I would think that it's entirely possible that we can exercise those weighted votes again.
Let's
Just-
not.
Let's.
Maybe not.
Everybody's-
That's fine.
I think it's gonna be unanimous.
So as a reminder, we do have two more seats on that committee as well, so.
I've only got one more.
Do you only have one left?
Yes.
Yes.
I have more packets.
So we'll take the back page off and then they will all be short next time, so we'll just have to remember that. Yeah, that recycling.
Oh, yeah, we're gonna have to.
Good thing we practiced.
You will be experts in the use of the weighted votes when we move forward into our normal activities this year.
Anybody good at coding, you could run math for that.
That would be very handy.
Write down my weight on the bottom corner.
I bet you do. I bet you could do
Point
it.
myself.
I feel like that would be helpful in that class or students. Look at that as
Could think of a few.
an easy peasy.
I got a couple.
Yeah,
He's saying he could.
Jeff's like, I can help you with that if you guys would just ask.
Oh no, I know a kid that could probably help you with that.
Yeah,
That'd be cool.
That's not humiliating to us at all.
yeah. Exactly, we're like, oh, there must be an easier way than that tiny little paper ballots. And we're like, oh, there's like 6 kids that could be, what are we,
They
8,
probably
22
go to school
now?
here,
Right,
right now.
they probably have it done by 8:27 or something like that.
You could use some Python practice.
Yeah,
Make it happen.
It's good.
very cool.
It's gonna be a tie.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah,
It is, it
it's
is.
like the exact same weights for the two, and then we'll just do this one to complete
Really?
complete it.
Okay, so. Oh, she's.
This is a better setup.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have a tie between two people. The tie is between Crystal and Jessica. Would you like to vote again with only those two choices?
Yes, I think that would be the clearest sort of thing. So we're gonna do.
Who needs another booklet?
Extras.
You pick 'em out of the
Oh,
hat.
you all have one more left, right?
Okay,
Okay, and
so
we're gonna
use
need
that
those
one,
extras.
and then we'll
Yeah.
pass the booklets out.
So this will be the,
Either Crystal or Jessica are your choices. Yes, I think this one's more clear.
Yes, and maybe we don't need to.
I don't think we need to.
I don't think we need to.
No. So, Crystal,
Congratulations.
congratulations.
All right, moving on to 5.2, nominations for the second position on finance.
I would like to nominate Brooke Nato.
I couldn't hear you.
I said I'd like to nominate Brooke.
Thank you. Yes.
She's asking about, you're gonna be closing up shop.
Yeah, lock us in.
Yeah, we won't, the rest of the, we shouldn't need weighted votes for anything, but, this. So we have a nomination for Brooke. Do we have another nomination for the second? Yes, Jamie.
But we have to nominate 2 people, right? 2 more?
You don't, well, so there's two more seats. There's nothing that says there has to be more than one nominee for each seat.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna nominate Joe.
For this second position?
I guess, and then
You-
also the third.
So we-
Okay,
Well, is Jessica already on it?
no.
Oh.
So the nominees at this point for the second position are Brooke and Joe.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Because
I
there's
guess
also
I
a
was
third
confused.
position open. That's,
Right, so there are
sorry, I
three.
was trying to
Right.
help because I realized she might
Sorry,
have
I
a
was-
question about
I
this.
was like,
And
sorry, I
meant to
was
raise my
trying to.
hand so you could recognize me.
So at this point, unless anyone wants to reconsider the nominations, the nominees are Brooke and Joe.
Should I
rescind my
You
nomination.
can do whatever you wish. I mean, there's nothing wrong with there being 2 nominees.
Okay,
I think you should.
okay, I will.
Okay.
You don't have much going on, right?
So okay, you would like to take that back?
Yes, I'm taking
Okay,
it.
You're taking that back. So we have Brooke in nomination for the 2nd position on the Finance Committee. Do we have any other nominations for that? Nominations? If not, I would entertain a motion to cease nominations. Anthony, do we have a second? Oh, that was a tie. That was
Sorry.
like Kyle
Yeah.
and Joe and everybody.
Sorry,
All those
sorry,
in,
yeah.
all those in favor of ceasing nominations? Appears to be unanimous. Brooke.
Who needs more?
Oh, and even though there's only one, I think we need to
do.
still write this down.
Anybody?
I
And we
need
have,
one.
and we have to vote on the third, you still have to make.
Correct.
Don't you need,
I did, I was
Oh.
just gonna pass them
oh,
down.
we
to
need the whole
help with-
book.
You just need the
Well,
one
you
that
need
says
2 more,
Finance Committee.
this one and the next one, and then we're done, right?
Yes,
Oh.
everything.
You're gonna
you
need
want
This
it
is the
to
only,
say
two for
finance.
finance.
yeah, so
It
there's
has to
one
say
more,
finance.
one more seat that requires a vote. Everything else is by
Cross out chair.
volunteer,
There's 4.
voluntold.
Great.
Can I
So
see
March,
that?
you
Oh,
have
okay,
that.
so okay,
I need
so
to
no,
see
I
what
didn't-
you're gonna work
Yes,
at a flag.
now I'm like, I can't see anything.
Did you guys share
Because-
already?
Because Jessica's not here,
Okay.
and
So it-
did she indicate what committee she wanted to be on?
She did to me.
Okay, all right. Just wondering if you know that, you have that
Yeah.
secret information.
But it's, I mean, it's, yes, I will share that as we go.
Oh, are we ready?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm
vote.
sorry, I'm just like deer in the headlights.
And we have checked a couple times procedurally, like, this seems silly, do we have to do this with the little ballots? And apparently we do, for some bizarre reason.
Is it a statute? Oops, I'm speaking now.
Tammy, yes, I think it is. And why anyone thought it was important enough.
Shocked to hear that Brooke is the other member for the 2nd chair.
Congratulations, Brooke. So right now, we have Crystal as our chair, Brooke as the 2nd member, and I would entertain nominations for the 3rd member of the Finance Committee.
I would like to nominate Joe.
So we have Joe.
Joe, you ain't getting to get out of this.
Green and Leeds are already there. Just saying, Turner might wanna jump in.
Do we have other nominees for the Finance Committee? For the 3rd
No, Turner's there.
final?
Oh, my backwards?
No.
No?
Oh,
Green-
you're right,
Green and
that's,
Leeds.
okay, never mind. Apologies.
Any other nominees for the 3rd position on the Finance Committee? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I'm gonna nominate Jamie.
So we have Joe and we have Jamie. Any other nominations for the 3rd position? Motion to cease nominations? Crystal and Anthony, all those in favor? We are ceased and our nominees are Joe and Jamie. And we have,
Anyone needs a ballot? I got some. Okay. Oh, you said you need some, sorry. Please.
Joe. Congratulations, Joe. So our 3 members of the
6 to 2.
Finance Committee are Crystal, Brooke, and Joe. So the balance of the committees, as we get to agenda item number 6, committees other than finance, and then, this is a little confusing. When we say vote to consider and establish the following standing and special committees for the ensuing year, Teresa, refresh me on how we've handled a motion on that, because then it becomes a little bit more confusing where our agenda says the chairperson shall appoint standing committees as follows or make such other arrangements as the directors wish. So we could
I
certainly have a
think
motion that says
That could be the motion.
these three
The motion
committees
is that,
that the chair shall appoint standing committees as follows.
I think so.
So I would entertain a motion to that effect, that the chair would appoint standing committees to include plant, transportation, building, curriculum, education, policy committee, and negotiations. The negotiations committee for the contract that will be negotiated in this year would be the TTEA, or the teacher's contract that we'll be negotiating.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we
Second.
have a second? Second from Jamie. Discussion from the standpoint of just making sure that we're all clear on what the committees are, and then we can have kind of a sub-discussion once we establish the committees as far as what people's interests are in those various committees. All those in favor of appointing those committees? Unanimous. So we'll have Plant Transportation Building, Curriculum Education Policy Committee, and negotiations, and that would be TTEA negotiations. I'm trying to reflect Jessica's committee thoughts in here. Plant Transportation Building, at this point, members have been, Kyle, you served on that
One time.
one meeting-ish. I think that was probably as much as we got through there. The way I have approached these historically has just been kind of to canvass the group, see what people's interests are, and as long as we have folks with interest on each of these, they tend to function quite a bit more effectively, rather than, all right, I signed up for this, I don't really, it's not my thing, but sure, I'll show up. Not that anybody would do that, but. So plant transportation, Kyle, is that something that you are interested
Yeah.
in? Joe, you had also expressed some interest in that. Crystal, you have,
I was on
You
that
have
in
been on that?
curriculum last.
Jessica's been on that and
Mhm.
indicated that she was interested in also being, in continuing to be on that. Do you have strong feelings one way or the
No,
other?
I don't.
Okay.
That's fine.
Anyone else have strong feelings about plant transportation building? Burning desire to talk about bus routes and perhaps buses? And again, the functions of our subcommittees have been relatively casual in that there is rarely something that, these in particular are coming back to the full board with a very strong recommendation that, we need 2 buses this year instead of 1 bus, or 3 buses instead of 2 buses. Typically, those are discussions that the full board is entertaining, so unless there are objections, we have Kyle, Joe, and Jessica on that one. Curriculum and policy, who was Jamie?
Jamie and Crystal.
Me, Crystal,
Jamie and Crystal.
Joanne?
Joanne.
Right. So interests,
I am
Anthony, Tammy.
No, I'm good.
Crystal, did you just say, no, I'm good?
She
unless-
asked, yeah. No,
I would like to
I'm
be
good.
on it again.
Jamie, you would?
Yes, please.
So Anthony, Tammy, and Jamie. And that brings us to negotiations. Jessica has served on negotiations committees before. She would be interested in doing so again. Who else is? Trying to think. Crystal, you served on one
Yes.
of the groups.
I can't remember which one it was.
The
ESP was something that got done last year.
Yes.
support staff contract.
I would, if you needed someone else on it, I would be happy to serve, but I've never done a negotiations committee before, so it would be new to me.
And as far as the work of that committee goes, I mean, this subgroup that serves on that committee comes to the full board for direction as far as what the parameters are.
Okay.
With the board works closely with the district's attorney, and the superintendent and the assistant superintendent review the contracts and try to give both the attorney and the group that's negotiating a heads up that, there was this particular aspect of the contract that seemed problematic this time, or everything worked great. It's just a matter of figuring out what the what the details are from a salary scale standpoint. So it certainly, again, I don't want anyone to think that the subcommittee is gonna work, like, do its work out here and without feedback from anybody else. That's not.
And if you don't have experience in it, it's something that you would get guidance from the whole board.
Yeah, absolutely.
And really, okay.
Yep, absolutely.
I do have a question. So as you sit in on these meetings, we're more or less a liaison between the meeting and what takes place there and back to the board.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to describe it,
Okay.
really. I mean, there would be conversations that would happen in the course of negotiations that clearly the board team would have parameters that they would engage in
That you
discussions
engage
on.
in.
Yeah, absolutely,
Okay.
and receive advice from our attorney and good stuff like that. But as far as no decision is made final until the full
Until the
board
board
votes
does
on it. I mean, there's
Okay.
certainly conversations as it goes on, as we're all hoping to negotiate in good faith and make progress on those discussions. But
Yeah.
absolutely, it's something where,
I mean, if you do need somebody, I don't know how many
Mhm.
people, I don't know how many committees we're supposed to commit to.
Mhm.
I mean, the curriculum would be where my heart is, but I certainly, teachers are too. And I don't know if that's okay to say, but it's true.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. So Jessica, Jamie, possibly Tammy, possibly other folks interested in the negotiations aspect. And again, remember that, I mean, the full board weighs in on it and has, it seems sort of loud in the background, but, sorry. Anyone
And
else?
that committee is only established and works through the time frame of the negotiations.
Right.
It's not,
Right.
but the other ones are just 1 year
Right.
until, okay.
Right, so PTB and curriculum education, those would, unless something came up, you'd serve on that through the course of the year until the next organizational meeting, or if something changed and you weren't able to fulfill the committee responsibilities or felt that you couldn't. Negotiations, as Teresa said, that's a pretty defined time period. Like, once we receive notification that we're intent to bargain and that kind of thing, that committee would begin work, and there would be an endpoint as well. So if that helps anybody who's thinking about that. So Jessica, Jamie, and Tammy, have I missed anyone with any strong feelings about? Okay, great. That takes care of our committees and brings us to some housekeeping details on the second page, and these are stated pretty much in the manner that the motion needs to, Teresa.
I believe that you also appoint a committee chairperson, even though for
Mhm.
PTB and curriculum, I mean, PTB, the business manager, and curriculum, myself, but I believe, because Joe was the chair of, so I think typically that happens at this meeting as well, so we know who the chair of that committee is. They're the ones that were put
Right,
out of the board.
and long ago and far away, like before we had people like Joe who had served as chair for ever and ever on the committee, I think the
They just
committee kind of
decided
sorted
them.
that out
Okay.
on their own, that like of the members of the committee decide who
All right, that's
decide who
probably
your
why I
chair
was thinking we needed
wants to
one.
be, and
Okay.
then that person's responsibility would simply be to report out on, these will all have their own agenda item and report out at meetings.
Okay.
Then that way the committees can kind of sort through that on their own.
Perfect.
Spirited game of rock, paper, scissors, always
Okay.
exciting. So agenda item 7 would be to authorize the superintendent to act as the board agent to apply for and administer funds with which the district may acquire from federal, state, and private sources. We have a motion for that one.
So moved.
Joe, do we have a second? Anthony, thank you. Discussion on this one.
That's not just part of the hiring contract?
It's another one that we annually need to provide specific authorization. Any other discussion on this one? All those in favor? Unanimous. Item 8 is to authorize the superintendent as district treasurer and the chairperson of the board of directors to sign tax anticipation notes and any other bonds and notes as they may occur on behalf of the district. We have a motion.
So moved.
Joe, we have a
Second.
second. Jamie. Discussion on this one. Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. Item 9, authorize the superintendent as district treasurer to sign checks and signature cards on checking and savings accounts on behalf of the district in recognition of Androscoggin Savings Bank as the district's official bank. Motion on that one.
So moved.
Crystal, we have a second. Kyle, thank you. Discussion on this one. Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. Item 10, to authorize the chair of the finance committee, chair of the plant, yep, that seems like it should be an R tonight for some reason, plant transportation building committee or chairperson of the curriculum education committee to open bids in the absence of the superintendent of schools. Any motion on this one?
So moved.
Joe. Do we have a second? Kyle. Discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous, and you may want to keep that motion in mind as you play rock, paper, and scissor on your chairperson selections. Agenda item 11, designate the superintendent or her designee as the official district spokesperson with respect to press relations regarding district matters. Anthony? Crystal? Discussion on this one? All those in favor? Unanimous. Item number 12, designate the board chairperson or the chairperson designee as the official spokesperson of the board of directors with respect to matters pertaining to board decisions. The motion on that.
So moved.
Jamie, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Crystal, discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. Item 13, attendance coordinator. Motion to appoint the assistant superintendent as the district attendance coordinator. Any motion on this one?
So moved.
Brooke, second. Joe, discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. 14, school physician. Motion to recognize DFD Russell Medical Center as the official district medical facility and doctors associated as the school physicians. Motion on that one?
So, Joe.
Brooke?
I'll second.
Crystal? Excellent. Discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. Comments by the board chair. Look forward to working with all of you. Thanks for giving your time and your commitment to what will undoubtedly be a productive year. We would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll motion.
Kyle, Brooke. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thanks, folks, for being here this evening. Enjoy what bit is left
Yes,
of
extra
your
ballots.
summer-ish